Thank you very much all for coming. And today we are going to talk about Other Days, a novel written by Arshad Waheed. So we have two panelists here. I'm going to moderate the session. My name is Waqas Masood, and we have with us Dr. Sara Ali from Quaid-e-Azam University English Department, and Madhia Arsalan, who is a poetess, and also she writes regularly in different newspapers. Um, so about the book Other Days. So at first I'll introduce Arshad Waheed. Most of you know him, but still those of you who do not know him. So he has translated works of Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Milan Kundera in Urdu. Uh, he wrote his first novel, Guman, in 1995. And then after a hiatus of almost 2.5 decades, he wrote this novel, Other Days. So the story of the novel spans over 4 decades, and so there are two main characters, Sara and Daud, around which the story revolves, and so they meet in a university, and one fine night they are assaulted by an extremist organization, and that incident changes their lives forever. So Daud has to leave the country, and shortly afterwards, Sara has to follow suit. Uh, and then many years later, they come back to their homeland, and to their consternation, they find that the society that they left has drastically changed. So that's the kind of gist of the novel, and the rest, I'll, you know, kind of leave it to you to read and find out all the wonderful things about the novel. So, Asha Sahab, I will start with you, and so please, share with us the journey of writing this novel, and I'll come up with other questions later.
Writing this novel. Uh, it just came to my mind when I was studying in London, and I came across many Pakistani immigrants, the families, and I learned their stories, and this idea came to my mind. But then it was a long journey, writing, deleting, writing again, and most of the characters, most of the events I had to change time and again. And once I realized that I can't do anything more into this story, I just thought I should let it go. And that was in 2021. So that's the whole story, I think.
Well, okay, so I would just like to share this that Acha Saab's novel was, declared the best English novel to have appeared in Pakistan by the Academy of Letters. So it's a great acknowledgement of his work. So, Acha Saab, Kundera says that when you write a novel, you must discover an unknown segment of human existence. So, what would you say on this statement and your novel, if you would like to tell us that, does it try and explore an unknown segment of human existence?
Well, it's quite a difficult question in the beginning. Well, I try to, of course. For me, writing a novel is quite different from writing other things. It's much different from writing social sciences because most of, novel doesn't mean that it has to tell history or it has to tell some psychological issues. It has to tell about psychology or other things. But all these things are used as a device in a novel. And basic thing is that in particular, this is my opinion, basic thing is that in particular era, particular time period, which events or which human condition that affected different characters to think differently, to act differently, what were their challenges, what were their fears, what were their dreams, what were their expectations, and how their interaction with the society. There might be success stories, there might be failures, our success and failures going side by side. So that is what I try to discover in this story. I can't tell what it was. For me, the first time I thought about this novel was that I realized that a generation is getting stranger in its own time, and how it happened, and it might have been happening before as well, but the pace of events this time is very fast. So that was the main idea which came into my mind. I thought about families who migrated from Pakistan and settled in UK or other European countries because they thought that this was a country where they could not realize their actual self. But when they went to other countries, there were different challenges, and all their time was consumed in dealing with those challenges. That, I mean, their dreams could not actualize even there as well. I mean, there are different stories. So I think I should not take too much. So that was my idea. It's not to tell history. It's not to tell history of Pakistan. But of course, I need a locale, a time period to set my story in. So it is. These are the devices. I mean, what were the '60s period? That was a global decade. That was radicalism. There was so many experimentation. Same was '70s in Pakistan. People were having hope. I mean, they had just survived defeat on other border of Pakistan, and then there were hopes that they might rebuild their nation, their people, but things did not happen that way. And then in early 2000, the world has changed altogether after 9/11, and many things happening in Europe. And no, Brexit is later, I think. Yeah. So all these things were happening. So how these things affected people, their internal lives. So that was I was trying to focus on.
Very good. So, Sara, as I've told you, she teaches English language at Jakarta University. So, Sara, I would like you to, tell us briefly about novel as a genre, and then your, views on the novel as a linguist.
First of all, I'm not a linguist. I did my PhD in literature, and I just wanted to talk about the themes. But before anything else, I wanted to ask you a question. Yes. So when you talk about locations, London is quite, it's mentioned everywhere. So she moved to London, or but while talking about Lahore, that from the look of it, like it looks like it's Lahore because it seems like the university is Punjab University and Riverbank is the riverbank next to Punjab University. Why the words Sheher
Share instead of Lahore.
instead of Lahore? I am a Lahori.
Well, I think it was my effort to create a distance. It was a story of very recent past, and it was also a story of. I mean, we can relate to. When I wrote my first novel, many people try to identify that this character it resembles that leader. This character resembles that political activist. This character resembles such and such writer. So I just tried to create a distance, time distance. I could not do because it had to be in this time, but the distance of locale, and it's not only Lahore. There are many other places in
Village,
Pakistan.
the village in Lahore, basically
The desert, which you can think is
yes.
around Cholistan.
Mhm.
So I consciously tried to change the names of all those places which are in Pakistan.
But Sheher, the word, the Sheher, and the way Sara looks at it, it's hope. You know, the way she talks about Sheher, even when she's living in London, the way she thinks about Sheher is she's nostalgic, obviously. But I think even when she was living in the village or when she was living in London, Sheher was her hope. And I think her visit to Sheher after all that, and then her last experience with Sheher in the novel I think kind of takes away her hope. So in that way, I found it. I was curious about it, and I found it so intriguing that you use the word sheher, because a lot of people would look at it as just an imaginary place where hope still exists. And for me also, it was just that hope. Okay, so before I talk about anything else, I want to talk about the language of it. I started reading this novel just after having taught a course on Pakistani literature, and I had just taught Homeboy, and then some of Kamla Shamsi's work, and after that, I just started reading this the same night, and um, I felt it was naturally flowing. I felt it was easy to digest, and um, and not talking about him as a writer, just talking about it as someone who was just reading a novel. I felt that um, the writer wrote the novel to tell a story, not to impress us with his words. There was no verbosity. There was no extra use of metaphors or any other thing that could distract me from Sara or Daud for that matter. So I love that about the novel, and I think as soon as I read it, the first thing I told you was this. Um, After that, I want to talk about the use of the metaphor of bird, like the way she's in village and anything that like the kites, the flying kites, the pigeons she had at village, and then every time she was in Sheher at her university, every time she would look up at the sky, she would see birds, and she was always uh, be fascinated by that. And felt that kind of represented her desire to transcend, to be more than what she was, a very individualistic um, way of looking at world, which I think we have lost because of all the customs and traditions of society. Even with Daud, like his interest in He Ranja and wanting to write about it, and looking at it as something, I think I've mentioned it somewhere, like looking at it something, it's a story of individual resistance against a repressive culture. So a lot of what Sara believes in, what Daud believes in, is a society which can be free. But then again, if you look at Daud's writing later, when he's writing his novel and he's talking about, and then he allows Sara to read it, there's a beautiful passage where he says, when you try to free yourself, when you're trying to break free of the barriers of society, you're creating new barriers. And so freedom itself is again a construction, and you can never really be free. And I think that's what happens in this novel, that Sara wants to live her life, not survive. She says it to Mehreen, is surviving more important or living the way you like? She wanted to live her life her way, but probably after the birth of her daughter, or trying to find a job in London and having to work, she kind of lost that spark in her, which Daud for some time brought back, and then he died. So I felt, all in all, this novel is actually about hope and then losing hope.
Okay, good. So I'll come back to you. So, Madhia, now I'd like to ask you the same thing. What's your take on the novel, and what is it that you found striking or, kind of resonating with you on a certain level?
Actually, it resonates with life itself. And it is so realistic in each and every topic that it is taken up. As individuals, Sara, Sami, Daud, Emmer, whoever all the protagonists are of this novel, they are so real, and they are not aiming for anything very high. They are just living the life as it comes to them, and they just want to live the life the way they want to. So that is the most striking thing here. And then there are few things which struck me while I was reading it, and I read it quite a while ago, last year, I think. This novel embraces feminism. It's not um, um, it's not a cause, but it's kind of an effect. Um, Waheed, it does not seem as if it's written by a man. It seems as if it's written by a woman. And then, I was trying to think, who else in literature have I found so close and so secure in writing as a woman? And immediately Amir Khusro came to my mind, and I said, wow, yes, there is a parallel that we can draw. Then this decolonized literature, the Anglophone literature, has its own perks. It talks about your identity. It talks about isms, socialism, Marxism, colonialism. It talks about communism and all that. So the setting of the novel is in 1970s, and then it moves on to another generation where Sara gives birth to Sami. And, Sami is a totally different person from Sara, being her daughter, but being brought up in London, and being brought up by a babysitter who is more inclined towards religion. Yes, Zulekha, and it's a total. She's a bourgeois. She's a middle class person who's aspiring to do this and that and want to dictate Emmer. You should live your life like this, and you should raise your voice for this purpose. On the other hand, Sara, the mother, she is she's the one who has broken all the stereotypes. She has uh, lived with a man. She in those days, she did what she wanted to. She moved as a single parent to London, raised her daughter all alone by herself. So it's such a different feel of the novel that you are not saying anything very loudly. You are not. It's not narrative representation. It's not focalization, but you are giving ideas to the readers. Then very interesting thing, that I found in Waheed's novel is, in Shakespeare's words, dream within a dream. The nostalgia that takes, even from the very first chapter, it takes you from one place to another. She is visiting this place where Daoud is learning swimming, and she looks at him, and she she's trying to figure out where she has seen him, how she has met him. And then all of a sudden she goes into a trance. And then I would like to read something which is related to it, an excerpt. And she says, okay, what will she do in the country? He wondered. Maybe she wants a few days of romance with her lost roots to remember for the rest of her life. And then there's another beautiful dream, and whether it's a dream or a reality, but it makes the reader, just for a few moments, it takes the reader out of the reality of that era, of that cruelty of fundamentalism. And here it goes, and it says, it's so beautiful. It says, much lighty. Okay. He felt a cold wave of fear run down his spine. His limbs started shaking in slow, uncoordinated movements. He was losing control of his body and falling into a void, a dark, unending void. Okay. Someone was coming closer to him, moving like a whisper. A hand held his arm and pressed it. Who else is in the room? A face became faintly visible in the darkness as he bent down. He then felt someone softly embrace him. Who is she? He touched her face. It was Banu. She was caressing him. He heard fine murmur of clothes. The claws on his soul started moving away. His disjointed limbs found their movements. In the absolute silence of the dark room, he was surrounded by her warmth and sensuous fragrance. The numbness in his body melted away. So, and then by the end of the paragraph, he says, when the first ray of the sun penetrated the cracks in the window, he got up to face a new day. So from one dream to another, from one place to another, the nostalgia keeps on happening. And it gives you feelings of closeness, and then it gives you feelings of anguish and agony, because once in the novel, when Sara visits Pakistan again and visits Sheher again, all the vibrant colors of Basant and Madhulal's poetry comes to her, and then she visits her village where there was no acceptance for her till her father was alive. So that anguish and that agony you can feel, and you become one with the character. Sara over here is an iconoclast. So, living a life which is dictated to you and then standing as your own, identifying yourself, and then doing as you like. That is the essence, that is the courage which is given, a kind of a hope, though it is the novel is very realistic, but that's the kind of hope that the novel gives to its audience.
Okay. Shiva, I would like to ask you another question.